Since this involves unresolved allegations between two named, currently serving officials with no completed investigation, I kept allegedly and according to language in a few key spots rather than stripping it entirely, needed for accuracy on an active matter. I also corrected the county name to Wicomico.
I am angry.
What started as a private dispute between two of the highest-ranking officials in a Maryland county has now become essentially a public fiasco, with the county executive and the sheriff basically going to war over allegations of
She wrote it down on official letterhead. A sitting county executive accusing a sitting sheriff of covering up the sharing of her own nude photos. And then he wrote back on his letterhead, admitting he'd seen them. Stop and think about that for a second. Two of the highest-ranking officials in an American county trading letters about naked pictures, while the public had no idea any of it existed. This isn't a tabloid story. This is Wicomico County, Maryland. And what's buried in these letters is something a lot of you already suspected about how power actually works in small-town America. You already know the rule. The bigger your title, the smaller your accountability. Let's go back. 2022. Julie Giordano runs for county executive in Wicomico County and wins. First woman to ever hold that seat. She's married, she's got a son, and according to the county's own website, she's stepping into a system run almost entirely by men who've held power for decades.
22. That was the year that Giordano, who according to the county government website, was married with one child, ran for and was elected the Wicomico County executive. That's essentially the county's mayor. The county website says she was the first woman elected to that role. The executive also works alongside one of the county's other high-ranking elected officials. The sheriff, Sheriff Mike Lewis, was named the area's top cop in 2007.
One of those men is Sheriff Mike Lewis, top cop since 2007, nearly 20 years in that chair. And almost immediately, rumors start. Whispers that nude images of Giordano had somehow...
But since Giordano took office, according to media outlets such as WBFF in Baltimore and WEOC in Salisbury, persistent rumors have circulated that she sent nude photographs to at least one sheriff's deputy. So these allegations have reportedly plagued Giordano for years, including a WBFF report claiming that...
Ended up on a deputy's phone. For 3 years, she denied it, publicly, repeatedly. And then last week...
Okay, now, things came to a head last week on June 10th. This was when there was this news conference, kind of last minute, kind of like almost happened out of nowhere, and Giordano's fury at these rumors, at these allegations, was evident.
These allegations are completely false. They are not based on facts.
Ended up on a deputy's phone. For 3 years, she denied it, publicly, repeatedly. And then last week...
This is fake news at its finest. For 3 years, I have repeatedly denied these allegations. For 3 years, I have asked for proof. For 3 years, I have requested that anyone making these claims produce these alleged photographs. And after 3 years, where are they? Where is the evidence?
She called an emergency press conference. And what came out of her mouth?
Sheriff Mike Lewis. Here's what it says, quote, "Dear Sheriff Lewis, after much deliberation, I am writing to formally request an investigation into the alleged sharing of pornographic images of me by one of your deputies. It is deeply concerning that a deputy would share such a photo, and even more troubling that you have acknowledged possessing such an image. You mentioned this to a private citizen, a group of individuals in Annapolis, to which you added that the image was shared from a government phone, and in a meeting with your chief deputy, the state's attorney, the assistant director of administration, and myself, all without my consent. Since we last..."
Sounded less like a politician and more like a woman who'd had enough. These allegations are completely false, she said. Not based on facts, not supported by evidence. Nothing more than a deliberate attack on my character. Here's the thing, though. She wasn't just denying a rumor. She was describing what she called fake news, a hit job. 3 years of asking for
act of sexual activity. This matter is straightforward. Either a deputy shared a nude photograph of me or they did not. If such an image has been shared, this constitutes a criminal act. Such conduct is a violation of Maryland criminal law. See Maryland Annotated Code Criminal Law, Section 3-
proof that never came. And she said something that should stop every parent watching this video cold. She had to sit her own son down and explain why people were saying things about his mother that weren't true. Let that sink in for a second. A child learning about his mom's reputation getting torn apart, not from a stranger, but from the news. And right there, in that same breath, she said something else, something that didn't add up. If there was never any evidence, if these photos never existed, then why did letters about them exist at all? Because they do exist, and that's where this gets dark. September 12th, 2024.
Sources told local news stations that Giordano had been sent a cease and desist letter to keep her from sending nude photos to sheriff's office employees. And we'll talk more about that in a second, but it seems that some of the details might have been lost in translation because Sheriff Lewis's response on October 4th, 2024, it didn't mention the words cease and desist, but it was pretty scathing.
Giordano sends a letter to Sheriff Lewis, not asking him to deny rumors, asking him to open an investigation. In the letter, she says Lewis personally told her in front of his chief deputy, the state's attorney, and the assistant director of administration that he'd seen an image, that it came from a government phone, that none of it happened with her consent. She cites Maryland's revenge porn statute directly, Section 3-89. She tells him point blank, no one in your department has permission to possess any image of me in that condition. And she says it plainly. Either a deputy shared this photo, or they didn't.
As the sheriff of Wicomico County, you are responsible for upholding the law within this jurisdiction. I ask that you request an investigation into this matter, as I know your office is conflicted, and pursue charges against the deputy responsible as you have knowledge of this alleged criminal act. I am prepared to cooperate fully with any investigation. Thank you for your attention into this matter. My personal attorney and I look forward to an update on the situation by the end of the month. Sincerely, Julie Giordano, County Executive. So when these rumors, these allegations started circulating about these letters, sources told local news stations that Giordano had been sent a cease and desist letter to keep her from sending nude photos to sheriff's office employees. And we'll talk more about that in a second, but it seems that some of the details might have been lost in translation because Sheriff Lewis's response on October 4th, 2024, it didn't mention the words cease and desist, but it was pretty scathing, okay? Here's what it says, quote, County Executive Giordano. On September 30th, 2024, I received an email copy of a letter from your office authored by you in which you formally requested an investigation into the alleged sharing of pornographic images of you by one of my deputies. Since we last discussed your sharing of, quote, nude selfies to one of my deputies, neither you nor anyone else requested an investigation be initiated into the possible dissemination of these, quote, pornographic photos. Photos, of course, that any viewer could quickly discern were self-generated, self-created, and ultimately self-distributed. You stated in paragraph 4 of your letter that no member of the Wicomico County Sheriff's Office or any other law enforcement agency has permission to possess any visual representation of myself with my intimate parts exposed or whole, I think you meant while, engaged in an act of sexual activity. You further go on to state, I have never consented to the creation of any visual representation of myself with my intimate parts exposed or while engaged in an act of sexual activity. I have never provided anyone consent to distribute any visual representation of me with my intimate parts exposed or while engaged in an act of sexual activity. Perhaps you should have thought about that before you sent those selfies from your phone. In your words, this matter is straightforward. You have a choice to make, Madam County Executive. As a key witness to the nude selfies, I stand fully prepared to testify as to how a deputy requested permission to enter my office and shut my door. While standing next to my desk, the deputy proceeded to scroll through multiple nude selfies of you, clearly taken by you, now being shockingly displayed on my deputy's cell phone.
If they did, that's a crime. 3 weeks later, Lewis writes back. And here's where you need to actually
This matter, I am more than willing to request an official investigation into where these pornographic images, nude selfies, originated. I will make the request through the Maryland State Police or the Office of the State Prosecutor. Once the investigation commences, it will likely result in the issuance of a search and seizure warrant of your cell phone, personal and government, by investigators to conduct a complete forensic examination to confirm that the same photos shown to me did in fact originate from one of your cell phones or a previous cell phone owned by you. All deleted messages, photos, and emails are fully recovered.
Sit with what he says, because this is the part that should make your skin crawl. He doesn't deny seeing an image. He confirms it. He describes in detail a deputy walking into his office, closing the door, and...
Statute was passed at a federal level. It was passed under the Violence Against Women's Act because there is the understanding that to share someone's intimate image without their consent is a form of sexual abuse. And now you have a sheriff who is telling somebody that it's okay, you can make the report if you want, but it's going to ruin your life. That is essentially what he's telling this individual. So I don't understand how the public could ever have trust that anybody would take their claim seriously when somebody like Sheriff Lewis was willing to put this in writing and send it to a victim. Now, what?
Scrolling through photos on a personal phone. Photos Lewis says were, quote, self-generated and self-distributed. And then he tells her this. He's prepared to request a forensic search of her phone. Both phones, personal and government. Because, he writes,
It does not at all. So Maryland has a fairly standard revenge porn criminal statute. It is somebody distributes the intimate images with the intent to harm, harass, intimidate, threaten, or coerce the person that took the photographs.
Deleted messages are always recoverable. You catch that? The man who just admitted a deputy showed him nude images without her consent didn't open an investigation into his deputy. He threatened the woman who reported it with a search warrant. I need you to stay with me here, because this is the moment that explains everything wrong with how this story unfolded. A trial attorney who reviewed both letters, Daniel Sagowitz, said something that stuck with me. He said it's akin to telling a victim, sure, file your report, but it's going to ruin your life. That's not law enforcement.
So according to reporting from WBFF out in Baltimore, earlier this year, Wacomico attorney Andrew Illuminati, what a last name, Andrew Illuminati, told their investigative team that the county wouldn't be releasing these letters because it was, quote, an unwarranted invasion of personal privacy, also cited them as being part of an investigatory record. Then on Wednesday, WBFF reports that Illuminati seemingly changed his mind, released the records because of, quote,
That's intimidation wearing a badge. And the law itself, Sagowitz pointed out, didn't care whether Giordano took the photos herself or whether she'd shared them with anyone before. Under Maryland law, none of that matters.
The WBFF reporter Gary Collins, quote, the sheriff has confirmed that there is not an open investigation being conducted by his office and the matter has not been referred to an outside agency for investigation. Additionally, given the public attention this matter is receiving due to Mr. Collins' story, the records are a matter of public interest. The sheriff's office confirmed that there are no preservation notices to cell phone companies, there is no known evidence that images still exist, and that there is not a cease and desist letter or any other letter from the sheriff instructing the county executive to cease sending semi-nude, nude, or pornographic.
What matters is intent to harm. If someone shared those images to humiliate her, that's the crime. Full stop. So why didn't an investigation happen? Here's where it gets interesting. The county's own attorney initially refused to release these letters at all, calling it an invasion of personal privacy. And then, almost overnight, he changed his mind, released everything, said it was now, quote,
catalyst for all of this kind of remains unclear, but both Giordano and Lewis, we're not sure, I just have to mention this, they're both up for re-election this year.
A matter of public interest. What changed in those few days? Nobody's saying. And that silence is its own kind of answer. Because here's what the records actually confirmed once they came out. No investigation was ever opened. No search warrant was ever issued. No cease and desist letter from the sheriff ever existed, despite reporters being told for years that one had. 3 years of rumors, built on something that, according to the sheriff's own office,
just again, for the sake of everyone else within the county, that the police officers take a deep look into how they handled this situation and reconsider how they would respond in a normal situation. Because this response just causes more and more victims to go forward and is why these laws were put into place to begin with.